Wii Sports is the best-selling single-platform video game of all time. Chances are you've played it before. And if you have, you probably think it doesn't lend itself well to speedrunning. Most games have a clear objective: go from start to finish as fast as possible. How do you do that in Wii Sports? I made a video about Wii Sports Resort Golf a while back. Imagine the precision and skill involved with speed golf multiplied by 5 sports. Here's the story of the gamers who've done it. This is the history of Wii Sports World Records. The biggest speedrun category in Wii Sports is called All Sports. It involves winning a game in each of the 5 sports consecutively. That means winning a game of tennis, winning a game of baseball, completing 10 frames of bowling, playing 3 holes of golf, and beating a boxer. You have to play them in order, and since there's no other option, you have to use motion controls. Now, Wii Sports came out in 2006, but serious runs didn't get started until close to a decade later. In 2014 and 2015, runs clocking in between 10 and 12 minutes were completed by Plied823, RSR, and Nate9000. But as is so often the case, videos either no longer exist or are in very poor quality. So, we have to go to July 2015 to get our first watchable run. A 945, by the mid-2000s internet culture named Nate9000. There were 5 sports for Nate to get through. The first one was actually the simplest: tennis. Your opponents are picked based on your skill level. At level 0, you'll get Miyu and Matt, who barely know what they're doing out there. You have to get 4 points to win, so Nate tried to just end each rally as quickly as possible. By serving at the very top of your throw, you'll hit the ball harder and make it tougher for the opponent to return it. This has about a 5-frame window, or a 1/6 of a second. So Nate did that 4 times and hoped his opponent would miss it, which is random. If they returned it, he just hit it across the court to quickly end the rally. It took him only 25 seconds to win the game and exit back to the menu. And that's pretty much all there is to tennis in Wii Sports speedrunning. You can lose a bit of time from returns, but even those only cost a couple of seconds. However, the next sport is way more involved than the simple rallies of tennis. It was time for Nate to play some baseball. The most important thing to know here is that if a team's ever up by 5 or more runs after an inning, the game ends right there from the mercy rule. So the idea is that you want to get 5 runs as fast as possible in the top half of the inning, then get 3 outs in the bottom half, and have the game end after just 1 inning. Hopefully Rob Manfred's not getting any ideas. However, getting an optimal inning of baseball is way easier said than done. When batting, there was no real strategy. Just swing at good pitches and pray you get hits. Nate reached on an error, then lined one to left for a base hit. From there, he was off to the races. A double in the gap, then a bloop to right. Some bad luck for Akira on the mound. But there was nothing lucky about the 3-run shot immediately after. That made it 5 runs for Nate, but he still needed to get out twice more to end the inning. So, he just struck out twice on purpose, on fastballs that make Barry Zito look like Brusdar Graterol in comparison. For pitching, you obviously want to get 3 outs without giving up any hits or runs, but there's a lot more to it than that. What you ultimately want to do is turn into Mark Burley. There's a foolish YouTuber who has a video if you want to know more about him, but essentially what it means is you want to induce weak contact for easy outs, and not strike people out. Strikeouts always take at least 3 pitches, while a ball in play for an out could be done in just 1 pitch. The problem, of course, is you have little to no control as to whether the batter will swing or not. So you have to make pitches that are good enough to not get barreled, but not so good that they just swing and miss. And of course, get super lucky. Nate wasn't so fortunate. His first batter stared at 3 straight strikes, and his second one, well, hit it there. His third batter struck out on an ephus, before he finally got out of the inning on a ground out. Not the ideal baseball split, but there were still 3 sports to go. Next up was bowling. The strategy here was a bit more straightforward. The more strikes you throw, the better, since strikes only involve throwing the ball once per frame instead of twice. There exist setups to get a strike nearly every time, but they're all pretty slow, so Nate just threw it as fast as he could. He only managed 2 strikes, before intentionally missing on frame 10 to avoid the third throw. However, his shots were all fast enough that it was still a decent split. Now, it was time for sport number 4, golf. There are 9 holes playable in Wii Sports, but to count for an all-sports run, all you needed to do was the 3 in beginner mode, or either of the other 3 hole options. And then, it was time to play some speed golf. You line up for each shot as quickly as you can go, then hit it and hope for the best. There's not much time to think, you just line up and go. There's one key difference between golf in Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort. In Resort, if you hit an incredible shot, one that either lands near or in the hole from a long distance away, you'll get a replay that loses time. However, that mechanic is not present in the original Wii Sports, so anything is game. The better shots you can make, the more time you'll save. Nate tried to take advantage of this on hole 1, but his second shot landed over the hole. His first putt was wide left, so he had to take a par. Hole 2 was much of the same, with his initial shot going beyond the hole, then needing 2 more shots to get it in. And on hole 3, despite the crowd getting excited, Nate once again was unable to get under par. That made it 3 pars on 3 holes from Nate, which doesn't sound great, but keep in mind, he was against the constant pressure of needing to aim each shot as quickly as possible. And finally, the last sport is boxing. You want to ensure your Mii is ranked low to get an easy opponent, like Marco, then just go ham on him until they're down, and hope they stay down. If you punch in a rhythm, aiming for a nice 15 frame window on each punch, you'll be landing critical hits that do more damage. If all goes well, you'll be able to avoid getting punched at all and knock your opponent down quickly. Hopefully they'll stay down and won't get up. It's not known exactly what causes them to stay down, but it seems to be a combination of knocking them down quickly, not getting hit yourself, and some luck. And that's exactly what happened to Nate. This was the first ever sub 10 minute run of Wii Sports. There were some highlights, like a very smooth boxing match and the fast start he had to baseball. But of course, the large number of strikeouts and overall slow bowling and golf sections meant there was some big room for improvement. Nate knew this, and just 2 weeks later, he lowered it another 19 seconds. His golfing was particularly improved in this run, getting 3 birdies instead of 3 pars and not missing putts, which made up most of the time save. So, 9:26 was the new time to beat, and it would stand for over 2 years. It wasn't a particularly optimized record or anything. It was just one of those dry spells that speed games sometimes go through. But in June 2017, the Wii Series Discord server was created, which helped spark more popularity in running the game. In August, a player named Mr. Jimmy Steele 25 joined, and within hours, said he had beaten Nate's record with a 9:16. We'll get to this run in a moment, but there's something else important to discuss. When Jimmy started up his game of baseball, this cutscene played first. Now, most of you who have played Wii Sports before are probably familiar with it, but I guarantee there's a small subset of you who, despite having played the game before, have never seen this cutscene. And there's a reason for that. See, when Wii Sports was released in 2006, it was bundled with every Wii console sold. Europe, Japan, and most other regions of the world had the same version of the game. However, for a few months after its release, the version of Wii Sports that was sold in North America was actually an early version of the game. The community calls it 1.00, and it omits certain features present in 1.01, the version sold everywhere else in the world. The two most important features are both in baseball. First, the cutscene you just saw, which wastes about 5 seconds and can't be skipped, isn't present in 1.00. And second, whenever someone grounds out, an animation plays in 1.01 of them throwing the first, which wastes about 0.7 seconds. This animation doesn't play in 1.00. That means that for a typical all-sports run, playing on the early version of the game is hugely advantageous, as it'll save you close to 10 seconds over playing on 1.01. Now, when Wii Sports was re-released in North America in July 2007 to promote the new remote jacket, they updated it to 1.01 to match the rest of the world. The cutscene and the animations were added back in. So, this optimal speedrun version of the game can only be found on North American copies made within the first 9 months of its release. Any copy from the next 10 years is of the slower, updated version. That means that even though Wii Sports is one of the best-selling games of all time, this early version is quite rare. It's estimated that only about 1 in every 20 copies of the game is 1.00, or 1 in every 10 North American copies. There's an easy way to check if your copy is 1.00. If it's a North American copy and the title screen says 2006, then it's 1.00. If it says 2006-2007 and the Wii Remote has a jacket on it, then it's not the early version. Since Jimmy was playing on 1.01, he lost some pretty significant time in baseball from version differences alone. However, he had a smart strategy to use while batting. Once he got his 5 runs, instead of striking out on purpose, he bunted for a quick ground out. This took far fewer pitches than strikeouts, but it's tough to perfectly angle your bat to bunt the ball where you want it to go. On the pitching side, Jimmy was nearly perfect. A strike, then a ground out to short, a ground out to first, then a soft comebacker. A 4-pitch inning. The rest of his run was up and down, getting 2 strikes in bowling and a birdie in golf. Next up was Nicro, who set a 9:15 just days after Jimmy's 9:16. He has a pretty big internet presence nowadays, but back then he had just a few hundred followers. Now, Nicro's world record run was solid and all, particularly in golf where he got all 3 birdies. However, the highlight of the run was his batting. He had 1 run in, but 2 outs. He still needed 4 more runs. And with a ground ball hit at the second baseman, it wasn't looking good. But then...
Oh! Drop that, yes. Oh my god.
3 errors. The odds in that happening were 1 in 1,000. Nicro's 9:15 would stand for a few months, before being beaten by Alaska XP2 in January 2018. Alaska had an interesting skill set. He was particularly good at bowling and golf. In bowling, he managed to hit 7 strikes without carefully lining up. And in golf, he had more experience than most thanks to his golf runs in Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort. He managed birdies on holes 1 and 2, and thanks to a beautiful second shot on hole 3, he got an eagle there. However, Alaska struggled mightily with boxing, losing 9 seconds from mistimed critical hits. Still, it was good enough for a 904. 6 months later, Nitro would come back to snag another record, 901. Once again, it was an up and down run. His baseball was quite fast, with 5 quick runs while batting and no base runners while pitching. However, his 1 strike in bowling paled in comparison, and let's just say his golf hole 1 wasn't ideal. The run had good moments, and it had bad moments. We've seen a handful of records at this point, and you can probably tell that this up and down nature was typical for Wii Sports. Outside of tennis, any of the other 4 sports can cause massive time swings. In baseball, you've got to deal with batting and pitching. Both are extremely random and can literally cause minutes of time loss. With bowling, a good game versus a bad one costs up to 30 seconds. In golf, each missed shot can cost 10 seconds, and across 3 holes, that really adds up. And in boxing, missing critical hits can lose a dozen seconds or more. This game wasn't like your traditional speedrun, where you can optimize it and eventually grind down every split. No, the time swings in Wii Sports were different. They were more random and far harder to control. The record was 901, and with everything listed before going in the right direction, it could potentially go way lower, into the 8s or further. But the odds in having all those time swings go your way? It just wasn't realistic. Well, unless Alaska had anything to say about it. In the second half of 2018, Alaska would embark on a push to take the all-sports record into the 8-minute range and beyond. He certainly had the credentials to get it there, but the issues of before still remained. Getting all 5 sports to line up properly was just too difficult. He was gonna need some help. And over the next few months, that's exactly what he got. One new strategy he used was expanding the scope of bunting. Players had been bunting for a quick out for months, but if you very carefully angle your Wii Remote slightly more forward, you could potentially bunt for singles as well. The margin between bunting for a hit and bunting for an out was razor thin, but with a lot of practice, you can fairly reliably bunt it to third for a hit. So now, Alaska could theoretically bunt 4 times to load the bases and score a run, then hit a grand slam, then bunt 3 more times for outs. It could still go wrong, but there was potential for a really fast batting split. Now for bowling. The days of games with just 2 or 3 strikes had to be in the past. Alaska was going to shoot for more like 6 or 7 strikes in a good game. The record at the time, Nitro's 901, had only 1 strike. Alaska could easily save 20 seconds over that. He was already quite good at bowling strikes, but with more experience, he could save the time more reliably. In golf, Alaska began using an impressive looking strategy to save a few seconds. The driver chip. Similar to a trick used in Wii Sports Resort, the flag on the green acts as a wall if your golf ball hits it. If you're able to use a driver and hit your ball into it, it can fall straight down and enter the hole, saving time over having to slowly put it in or get it closer to the hole. Now, the driver chip may seem super precise, but there's actually a setup on hole 2 to get it nearly every time. By hitting your first shot into the bunker, you can then line up with the flag and pull out your driver. By swinging as hard as you can, the game will automatically hook the ball to the right at just the correct angle and speed to hit the flag. And finally, there was boxing. This was the sport that Alaska struggled with the most. There wasn't any particular new strategy he had to use here. He just had to improve at it. Get better at timing the criticals, avoid getting punched himself, and ensure that his opponent had no real